Now, police in New York say a man who drove into cyclists and pedestrians last night, killing 8 people, had been planning the attack for several weeks and had been influenced by the Islamic State group. The suspect, an immigrant from Uzbekistan, has been interviewed by police in hospital today. President Trump said that he'd ordered an increase in the extreme vetting of immigrants. Our North America correspondent Nick Bryant has the latest.
This is the kind of scene that preys on the minds of New Yorkers. One that recalls the trauma of 9/11, one that reveals how this city is vulnerable to new forms of terror. A rented pickup truck that became weaponized, a mode of attack that's common in Europe, but now used to deadly effect on American soil. And just yards from Ground Zero, the site of the September the 11th attacks, the antenna on the New World Trade Center, bathed in red, white and blue, to honor the 8 people killed. This is the suspected attacker, Sayfullo Saipov, a 29-year-old who reportedly shouted, "Allahu Akbar, God is great," as he left his truck. He was brandishing fake weapons and was shot by the police and taken into custody. Moments earlier, he'd driven at high speed along a riverside bike path, mowing down cyclists and pedestrians.
This was an attack on the United States of America, an attack on New York City, an attack on our people, and it was the definition of terrorism, an effort to take away people's hope and spirit and to make them change. And what New Yorkers showed already is we will not change.
Saipov is an Uzbek immigrant who came to the United States in 2010. He chose Halloween because the streets would be more crowded and has told police he was pleased with the success of the attack. The FBI has just announced it's seeking information about a second Uzbek man in connection with the attack. One of the early clues that investigators found at the scene were handwritten notes in Arabic pledging allegiance to the group calling itself Islamic State. But there's no evidence yet of a direct link to that group.
You got kids in there? All right, hold on.
His attack came to an end when he crashed into a school bus.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Okay, I need an ambulance right here.
That was an accident because he intended to continue all the way to Brooklyn Bridge. Police found knives in his vehicle. He rented a truck before so he could practice making turns.
Oh my God.
He appears to have followed almost exactly to a T the instructions that ISIS has put out in its social media channels before, with instructions to their followers on how to carry out such an attack.
Among those killed, 5 friends from Argentina, men in their late 40s in New York to celebrate the 30th anniversary of their graduation from college. Look at the camaraderie and fun they were having just a short while before as they rode bikes down the Hudson River on a perfect autumn day.
Our hearts break for them.
President Trump is demanding a more aggressive criminal justice system.
We need quick justice and we need strong justice, much quicker and much stronger than we have right now. Because what we have right now is a joke and it's a laughing stock. And no wonder so much of this stuff takes place.
In his hometown, this tower was erected in defiance of terror, a symbol of a resurgent city that refused after 9/11 to be cowed. And at the ground level this morning, that spirit was very much in evidence, joggers following their normal routes. Even a cyclist berating a pedestrian for getting in her way, a scene that speaks of everyday New York. The city has experienced worse dawns, and waking up to the threat of terror may well be an irreversible fact of life. Nick Bryant, BBC News, Manhattan.
Well, as we've seen, responding to the attack, President Trump called for tighter immigration measures, which he said would help tackle terrorism. The president said he wanted to end what's called the diversity lottery program. That's the method of obtaining a US visa, which was used by the suspect in this case. The president said America needed to get tougher, smarter and less politically correct. Our North America editor John Sopel has more details.
He's the FBI's worst nightmare. Sayfullo Saipov, an immigrant from Uzbekistan in Central Asia, who's become radicalised in the US and has barely flickered on their radar screen. As forensic experts continue to pore over the truck that he weaponised, the president is combing over America's immigration system and is demanding that the green card lottery be ripped up.
So we want to immediately work with Congress on the diversity lottery program, on terminating it, getting rid of it. We have to get much tougher, we have to get much smarter, and we have to get much less politically correct.
The tradition has always been that after a terrorist attack, when the nation is in mourning, the political class will put aside their differences and come together united. Not in today's America. Less than 24 hours after the attack in Lower Manhattan, the political battle lines have been drawn in a sharply divisive way. The president tweeted this morning that terrorists came into our country through what is called the Diversity Visa Lottery Program, a Chuck Schumer beauty. I want merit-based. The visa lottery was introduced when Republican President George H.W. Bush was in the White House. And though Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer was one of its architects, it was supported across the political divide. Today, the New York senator fired back.
The president ought to stop tweeting and start leading. The American people long for leadership, not divisiveness, not finger-pointing, not name-calling. This is a tragedy. It's less than a day then after it occurred, and he can't refrain from his nasty, divisive habits.
The Green Card Lottery allows 50,000 people from across the globe to settle in the US each year. Millions apply. In 2015, just over 4,000 came from Uzbekistan, a country that's never been on Donald Trump's target list. And in Tampa, where Saipov settled for a while, he steered clear of conventional Islam.
We've worked with the FBI in a number of cases of trying to protect youth from being targeted by groups like ISIS. And the first tactic ISIS does is try to get them away from the mosques, because they know the messaging of the mosques undermine the deviant, extremist, heretical message of groups like ISIS.
In New Jersey, where he'd been living most recently, police are trying to piece together every aspect of his life. His attack killed 8 in Lower Manhattan. It's likely to affect the immigration prospects of hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world. John Sopel, BBC News, Washington.
Well, let's go live to New York, and Nick Bryant, our correspondent, is there. Nick, the latest that you have there on the state of this investigation?
Two federal charges have been issued in the last few minutes for an attack that came to an end just behind me on the highway down below. And to give you a sense of my vantage point, I am here on Ground Zero. Those federal charges, they could bring the death penalty if the government gets a guilty verdict and also seeks it. Those charge sheets full of fascinating detail. For instance, the planning of this attack had been going on for months. He had hired a vehicle before so that he could practice turns. He intended to keep going to Brooklyn Bridge. Now, that is a 5 or 6 minute drive away. He had considered using Islamic State flags in the front window, in the back window. He was concerned that that might draw attention to him. But when he was taken to hospital after being wounded by the police, he tried to get them to put an IS flag up in his hospital room. He apparently had 2 phones, one to download IS propaganda, another to look up things like Halloween and how to rent cars. And of course, he deliberately planned this for Halloween because the streets would be crowded with so many people and so many children. Now, in the last few minutes, the police have been saying they were looking for a second Uzbek man in connection with this attack. Now they're saying they're not looking for that individual anymore. Hugh, this is a very fast-moving investigation, but at the moment, it does seem that they are considering that he wasn't part of a broader plot, that he was inspired by IS, but not directed by it.
Nick, many thanks for the update. Nick Bryant there for us with the latest on the investigation in New York.